if you are scoring at home, and I assume you are, we are exactly 1 month from the annual selection meeting, also known as the 2026 NFL Draft in the lovely, the bucolic, the vacation destination of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And with that, we welcome you to a Monday edition, an off-season edition of Inside Coverage on Yahoo. Hope you had a fantastic weekend. My name is Andrew Siciliano. This is the how, the why, any and everything you need to know about the National Football League or about your NCAA bracket, where today I'm joined by Yahoo senior NFL writer Jori Epstein and our betting analyst, our guru, Ben Fawkes, with Jori celebrating, basking in the glow, the glory, the bracket-affirming joy of her Texas Longhorns beating Gonzaga and moving on to the Sweet 16. Jori, a hearty mazel to you and yours.
Thank you so much. I mean, they were not winning a lot of March Madness games when I was in school, from the Rick Barnes to the Shaka Smart era. So it is good to see that change a bit.
And of course, you had them in your bracket.
Of course. And of course, I did all sorts of brackets, all on Yahoo.
Company
well
woman.
Done. Well done. That is towing the company line right now and right there. Congratulations, Jori. Ben, where'd you go to school?
Claremont McKenna, D3. So no, I think we made the tournament, the D3 tournament this year, but can't say we went that far.
Okay. Well, you probably went as far as the Syracuse Horsemen. The Orange women, they won, and now they get UConn in the next round as we sit here recording this on Monday. The men didn't make the tournament. However, they did win because Jerry McNamara, who pushed Duke to the limit in the opening round, actually had a double-digit lead with Siena, the school he had been coaching for the last 2 seasons, then eventually lost it at the end. Jerry McNamara is coming home the hero, along with Carmelo Anthony of the 2003 national championship team, is once again the coach. You guys want to talk about football instead?
We do a little football.
Okay, let's do football. We have room for football. In all seriousness, it is 1 month until the draft. There were 2 flag football events in Los Angeles and Southern California this weekend. Interesting what happened at the one where Tom Brady was playing football, broadcast live on Fox. I was there at that. We'll talk about flag football and the Olympics and what it could mean for LA 28 coming up in a little bit. But the Monday news was a new market reset at wide receiver. Jaxon Smith-Njiba, JSN, for whom the Seahawks picked up a 5th-year option, obviously, a couple of weeks ago, gets a new deal, 4 years, $168.6 million. So the new top of the market is $42.2 million or thereabouts, $42.15 million. Now, in reality, it's about a 2-year guarantee for about $69 million. But Jori, what this does is it sets a very high bar for, say, Puka Nacua, who's heading into the final year of his contract. And it also, if you're Jerry Jones, sets a higher bar for George Pickens, who has a franchise tag.
Absolutely. Yes, our editor, Al, asked me what this meant for George Pickens today. And I'm like, I actually don't think it means a whole lot this offseason, in the sense that I still expect George Pickens to play on the franchise tag, or better yet, I think he should, because I think it makes sense for both sides for them to get a little more data. George, if he balls out again, it's just going to make more money. So he's got an upside to that as well. But if you're looking at that negotiation for Dallas, first of all, it definitely raises the floor. I mean, the same way we talked about when Daniel Jones received the transition tag rather than the franchise tag, the floor for the cost of the negotiations per year went up because of that. I mean, the floor went down because of that. It was more reasonable. So too with Jaxon Smith-Njiba resetting the contracts for the receivers, I think it goes up. As it relates to Puka Nacua, I think that's one of the reasons Seattle did get that done now is, first of all, there are void years on the deal. The guarantees are really stacked towards the beginning of the year of the deal. And so there's really kind of this sense of, why don't we get this done before Puka gets done? Why don't you set some sort of record and some sort of way you can cut the cake? And I'm not saying it's all fake. Like, there is some real good money on here, but Puka can now take this, probably make more per year, and also receive more in guarantees and maybe a 3-year commitment instead of a 2-year commitment in terms of the pre-voidable years.
It's always fascinating too, in each of these position groups, kind of knowing like the classes and who you're going against and who's going to be potentially extended. And it's kind of a race, right? Who gets this done first? Because generally they're not a lower number, right? You keep raising it and raising it. And outside of seemingly the Cowboys, who like to just keep pushing things later and later, and it gets more and more expensive, this is what good teams do. This was always going to be something that they did, especially the Seahawks, right? There's certain teams and kind of certain players that are even more important. And JSN, what is the drop off from him to the number 2 wide receiver or even pass catching option on that team? Like, he is such an essential piece of that offense. Even though he didn't do that much in the Super Bowl, the Patriots obviously had to have a lot of attention on him, opened up the running game and other things. And just looking back, I mean, we talked about the NFL draft, right? And John Schneider, that draft in 2023, I believe, Devon Witherspoon at number 5, JSN at number 20. That's a pretty good draft. And the 2021, I believe, Ohio State wide receiver room, 5 first-round picks: JSN, Garrett Wilson, Olave, Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka. Not a bad wide receiver core in college for Ohio State. They keep churning them out, and it's hard to believe of those 5, we got a long way to go, but of those 5, that JSN would be kind of the best receiver right now in the pros.
Yeah, he had an amazing season, and he had nearly 1,200 yards downfield this year, meaning 10 or more air yards. So it's not as if, and people looked at him, I think, coming out of college and went, those other guys were bigger. Marvin Harrison Jr. obviously came a year after. He's a bigger receiver. Chris Olave is a bigger receiver. JSN's a slot. He's not. He plays outside. He can play inside. He has both short area quickness and downfield speed. He's a precise route runner. And you team him up with Sam Darnold this past year, including Kubiak calling plays, the guy just blew up. And he had a great year. And if Carnell Tate goes in the first round, as many people think he will, most assume he's going to be in the top 10, that will make it 6 consecutive years that Ohio State has a first-round wide receiver. It is always cheaper to pay early. And this goes for every position. Not just quarterback, but wide receiver as well. Running back might be the outlier, but if you get ahead of it, which is what John Schneider is doing here, because he does have to pay Devin Witherspoon as well, and his market will be higher or right around the same because he's a top 5 pick, and corner is also a premium position. The earlier you pay, the cheaper it will be. Jori, there is this idea, and agents certainly, this is kind of part of their identity and part of their prove it and their marketing strategy to not only their current players to retain them, but future clients as well. This idea that I can get you $1 more than the guy that went before you, or $5 more than the guy that went before you. And we could spin it many other ways, whether it's APY or total guarantee or guarantee in the first 2 years or guarantee in the first 3 years, whatever. There's a million different ways to do it. But that is always what the player wants. But I think more importantly, it's what the agent wants. And I remember having a dinner a couple of years ago. We were all on the road for training camp, and it was me, and it was Kurt Warner, and it was Michael Robinson, who has a Super Bowl ring. And we got into I don't want to call it a heated conversation, but, this back and forth here about why does the next guy always have to be the highest paid guy? And these two guys as veterans, and obviously accomplished television hosts and analysts, sat there and said, but wait a minute, the next guy up isn't always better than the last guy that got paid. But it's ingrained in the system that the people you just mentioned, Puka Nacua and George Pickens, have to get at least $1 more.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting because the Seahawks and the Rams are able to have these conversations with their receivers in part because of the cost of their quarterbacks.
Yeah.
You've got Sam Darnold, who's making $33.5 million per year. Obviously, you can split that up in different ways depending where you shift your salary cap space. And then Matt Stafford's making a little more, but it's still $40 million a year. You've got over 10 guys who are making in the 50s. Dak is at 60. And so for those teams, George Pickens being one of them, you have to recognize they're paying these quarterbacks. They're paying these ushers. Seattle has a quarterback that they said, we believe if we pay a guy who is less money, like maybe not the top 5 quarterback, we can still make it because of the pieces around him. And then you can keep some, but they also had to lose some guys in free agency. I think when it relates to Puka and whoever's next on the market, there is one point where a lot of these numbers aren't real. There's a lot of different ways to cut it up. It's a lot of inflated costs, or, I mean, I know we'll get to the Travis Kelce contract, but let's just say a lot of the numbers you see aren't actually, the earned money is not going to reflect the max value by the end of the contract. There is also an element, though, that the salary cap is growing. We keep talking about it's growth, growth, growth. It's $301 million plus this year. And so it's not just when I talk to salary cap people in the league and people working for teams, they don't view this as the raw numbers. They view this as what percentage of the salary cap is the new contract commanding. And so, yes, 42 is more than 40. And it felt like 4 seconds ago that Justin Jefferson was getting 35, and that felt crazy, and CeeDee Lamb 34. But the salary cap has risen significantly since then. And so it's really, that would be a more comparable. It's just a way less, it's a way less easy conversation for everyone to wrap their head around when you say, like, oh, we used to be getting 17% of the salary cap and now we're getting 16.3%. But that's a big part of this, is the rise of the salary cap.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And that's such a metric we should use in the same way, like somebody trading a first round pick. If you trade the 30th pick and the number 4 pick, they're both
right.
first round picks. They're very different picks. This is a little bit like the NBA, right? With sticker shock. We're like, that guy's making $60 million. Well, compared to the cap, it's not that much higher than these other salaries when the salary cap was lower. So I think, yes, you just have to look at that in kind of different positions. And we've seen the value of wide receiver go up too, right? And we've seen running back be depressed. It's just the way the NFL is going right now. Same thing with quarterback being even more expensive than it was relative to the salary cap, with the salary cap going up.
Yeah, so 2 years ago, Justin Jefferson's deal, Jori, to your point, 4 years, $140 million. I'm not even looking at guarantees here. I'm just the APY. 4 years, $140. Then Jamar Chase a year later, last summer, was 4 years, $161. And then this year, JSN, 4 years, $168.6. So it keeps jumping. And if Puka gets done, and I don't know that he will, but I assume he will. If Puka gets done this summer, I'll call it now. It'll be 4 and $170. That's a nice round number. 4 and $171. Something like that. That sound right?
And it's also worth remembering that JSN signed this 4-year extension, but it's not the only 4 years left. So this is $42.15 million per year in average of new money, but he's still got the 26th year and he's got the 5th year option. And that's also a difference with Puka, because Puka wasn't a first round pick, that there's no 5th year option for Puka. And so, I mean, exercising that 5th year option, it gets expensive relative to the rookie deals, but it can save people a lot of money over the course of the life of the extension.
Yeah, and this is really important to note here as well as we get towards the draft. A month away from the draft, we always talk about, hey, a team trading up to get to the bottom of the 5th round to get that 5th year on that rookie contract, like what the Ravens did most notably with a quarterback named Lamar Jackson in 2018 when Ozzie moved up and took Lamar with the 32nd overall pick. When you are a second-round pick, when you're out of the first round, rather, let's say it that way, but let's use the second round as an example, that's a 4-year deal. So Breece Hall is hitting free agency and getting the franchise tag right now because he was a second-round pick. If they had taken him Thursday night, not Friday night, they would have the 5th year option. They wouldn't have to do that contract right now. Now, they could have done one last year after year 3 because with the CBA, the current CBA, all rookie contracts are eligible to be redone, renegotiated, sign an extension, whatever, after year 3. So if you draft a quarterback in the first round, let's say, the clock is ticking because 1 year from now, we will be talking about whether or not the Bears, the Broncos, the Commanders, and the Patriots, with that rookie class, are going to give massive extensions, $50, $60 plus million a year to the quarterbacks that they selected in the first round in 2004. So why do teams get in this must win now under the rookie, with a rookie on a rookie contract, or rookie quarterback rather on a contract like that? Because they have 3 years until that agent comes to them and says, we want to get paid right now. That they don't have to. They can wait a year. The Dolphins waited a year on Tua. They weren't sure. Then they paid him, and now they regret it. But that's when the clock starts ticking. The clock also is ticking on the back end of a deal or the back end of a career. Travis Kelce is going to be 37 in October. And Jori, you're joking about like whether or not we believe these contracts. Do you play this game? Because I do. Like when you hear a deal reported, and this isn't, I promise you, as we put our friend Ian Rappaport's tweet on the screen, this isn't a shot specifically at Ian. But Jori, I know you play the same game I do, which is when you hear the initial report and Ian says 3 years, $54.7 million, you immediately go to your salary cap brain and go, all right, what actually is this deal? And the truth is, this is a 1 year, $12 million deal for Travis Kelce.
Absolutely. I texted a source and I was like, so how real is this, both in terms of the actual length of the contract before they could just void it and not have issues, and also the actual cost? Because it's really more like that 1 year, $12 million extension. And then, hey, if you stick around, there's kind of a framework for us to figure out what makes sense. And, oh, by the way, we don't have to take the full 12 on the cap this year if we don't want to because of the 3 years. And you can have all these different elements. So I don't think anyone should take this as a sign that Travis Kelce expects to play in the NFL for 3 more years. I'm not saying there's no chance he will, but this deal is not an indication that he is planning to play for 3 more years.
No, not at all.
Yeah, it's also funny just the, I don't know, negotiations like towards the end of a career versus in the middle, right? Because it seems like a win-win, right? He's not naming his price, but he probably gave a hometown discount. He's not going anywhere else. You can kind of, hey, what do you guys need? What works? You never want to tell someone they have enough money, but I think in Travis Kelce's current situation, personal and professional life, he's doing okay. I think, you know, a couple $1 million here or there isn't going to be too big of a deal. So that was my when I initially saw that, though, you go, whoa, 3 years. There's a guy who seemed like maybe he's retiring. Obviously makes a lot more sense as kind of let's get the band back together, assuming Patrick Mahomes is somewhat healthy, or at least a couple games into the season, kind of see what the Chiefs, who again, win total of 10.5, high up in the Super Bowl odds, expected to be right in competition to win the AFC West with the Chargers and Broncos, like expected to compete again, should be another good season. Was last season a mirage, or was that more what we should expect from the Chiefs going forward?
All right, so you want the details on this deal, like what it actually is. Again, it's 1 year, $12 million. So it's a veteran minimum base of 1.3, and then a restructure 10.3. So that gets you to 12. And then on the June 8th of next year, June 8th of 2027, there is a $40 million 2028 guarantee trigger. $40 million for 2028 trigger next summer. That ain't gonna happen. We all agree. We love Travis Kelce. We wish him well. Now, I'm not saying he won't play in 2027, but if he were to play in 2027, it would necessitate an entirely new contract. Because for him to play in 2027 under this current deal, it would guarantee the Chiefs have to pay him $40 million in 2028. So that ain't happening. We all agree on that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Although it is funny because I feel like some of these teams structure contracts being like, well, we expect A to happen. So if B happens, like, I'm just picturing that they would forget to cut him before the trigger date. But when we'll get to the A.J. Brown conversation today on later in the show, there are some situations where some of this money starts to look a lot more real than the team intended it to be.
Absolutely. For certain positions. Right? Yeah. Like, oh, well, that's not that. No, $40 million for, at that point, a 39-year-old tight end ain't going to happen. Also, like, I put like, you know, reminders in my calendar. Hey, cancel subscription, like by X, right? Or don't forget to pay taxes by X. Do you think that Brett Veach has a don't forget to cut Travis Kelce or owe him $40 million in his iPhone?
An intern does.
Yeah, that's the type of thing where I create it on Google Calendar, on Apple Calendar, first reminder 2 days before, another 1 week before, and sometimes I still forget to cancel the subscription.
Yeah, right. You do 3 or 4 like the same day, that final day, you do them every hour.
Or it's like your credit card payment. Like we're going to be at NFL owners meetings next week and it's going to be the end of the month. And I'm like, I should maybe schedule my credit card payment now. So when I'm at owners meetings, I don't need to remember. But then when it's Passover after, I'm not late. And there's all these scheduling things.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like paying your credit card bill or owing Travis Kelce $40 million. Very similar. We all have very similar.
We're just like NFL owners. Same thing. I mean, GMs.
Same numbers we're working with too, for sure.
Exactly. Coming up, Jori mentioned the A.J. Brown thing. What is holding up a potential trade? And is there a date later this summer, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, where we could see Philadelphia trade the wide receiver? Also, what I saw this weekend at the Fanatics Flag Football Classic with Joe Burrow and Tom Brady and Jaden Daniels getting their butts kicked here in Los Angeles. That actually happened. Oh, yeah. And should you, as a fan, care much about who is now in charge of the NFL Players Union? Maybe that's coming up on Inside Coverage. Inside Coverage on Yahoo. Andrew Siciliano, Jori Epstein, and Ben Fawkes here as we sit here on the 23rd of March. Exactly 1 month away from night number one of the NFL draft. Let's talk about the Players Union. And I know labor relations, most people just want to turn it off. You shouldn't do that, because as we get closer and closer to an 18-game season, there is this belief, this understanding, because we've told you this multiple times, that the 18-game season, if and when it comes, and we think it is, at least I think it is, it's going to come in 2029. What if I told you there's a chance it comes sooner than 2029, maybe even as early as 2027? True story. And the reason we can start these conversations now is that, Jori, the NFLPA, the union, finally has new leadership, except they don't really have new leadership. It's J.C. Tretter, the longtime offensive lineman, most recently with the Browns, and Jalen Reeves-Maybin heading up the union. Reeves-Maybin got on the field late in the season for the Bears, maintained his eligibility to be the player head of the union for the active players here because he's still an active player. From a fan perspective, why is this important? And pull back the curtain, if you could, from what we know and how it went down.
Yeah, people were very surprised to see J.C. Tretter back in the mix for the executive director role, because back in August, which is not that long ago, he had said on the record that he did not want the job of executive director and he did not want to be considered for the job for executive director. And that was kind of this idea of, hey, Lloyd Howell, the previous executive director who was elected when JC was a president of the board overseeing the election, it didn't go well. You can read all about the strip clubs elsewhere and the collusion agreement that was buried, et cetera, et cetera. But then we see on Monday that Jalen Reeves-Maybin, the current player president of the board, so there's the player leader and then the executive director of the whole organization, which is now J.C. Tretter, former player leader. The player leader came out with an extremely long letter, basically being, here's everything that went into our search process. Here are all the candidates we considered. Here are all the information and the different sources of information that we presented to the players who were voting. Oh, by the way, we forgot to tell you, but we're going to tell you now. There were 2 independent investigations by outside firms after Lloyd Howell was out last year, and they both cleared JC of wrongdoing, which is not something I had heard before and not something that was publicized today. And then one of the pieces of information that Jalen Reeves-Maybin somewhat touched on in his letter, and I confirmed with a source after, is that the executive committee last time when there was a vote for Lloyd Howell did not tell the players voting who they believed of the finalists was the best option. This time the players did ask them who they believed and could they rank the 3 finalists. And the executive committee, so there's 11 of them, and they were also the search committee because of a constitutional rule that JC had actually instituted as president last time. The 11 of them were all asked by the players, rank them 1 to 3. And they did rank them publicly for the players who were going to be voting on this. And there was not a consensus, which is to say that there was not any of the 3 people who were finalists, so that being J.C. Tretter, David White, who was the past guy, and then Tim Fernetti, who is Rutgers, American Athletic Conference Commissioner, et cetera. None of them got 6 out of 11 first place votes from the guys on the executive committee. And J.C., I'm told by a source, did not even get the most first place votes. So I thought that was really interesting that There are questions about what was above board here, and I do understand, and I share some of the sentiments of suspicion and just confusion about how we went from I don't want this positioner to be considered to right after a search committee comes and all of a sudden I'm at the top of the barrel. I think there are fair questions to ask, and there's not been a lot of transparency on elements of it. But I do think that I was surprised to hear and surprised that the PA chose to tell us that, hey, our executive committee did not endorse JC overwhelmingly or even primarily when asked to rank the candidates.
I was going to say I'm having flashbacks to the Pro Football Hall of Fame voting and all of that. I think obviously this isn't necessarily a betting story at this point. I will touch on from the 18 games. I think it's fascinating. Just there's so much basically in betting. Anytime you're entering something new or a new rule, you're creating variance and uncertainty, which is generally good for bettors because we don't know what an 18-game season would look like, right? When is the optimal time to have 2 bye weeks? Do you want one early and one late? Do you want them closer together? Do you want one after week 6 and the other before week 13 or something? Not to mention all the travel and now international games. So I think it would be fascinating from a betting perspective, as well as the scheduling perspective and when the season starts and ends and the Super Bowl and all that. I don't have a whole lot to necessarily add on the NFLPA and that. I leave that to the professionals, Jori and you. But I think once it does seem like we're going towards, at some point, that 18-game season is going to be fascinating from a betting perspective. Not to mention, obviously, all the kind of like baseball, all the old records now, win totals. It's out of 18 games instead of 17. What do the Super Bowl odds look like? Division, all those things. So it kind of changes a ton of different things from a gambling perspective, and then obviously the scheduling and what and where teams are actually playing.
You know, talking to players over the years, the union or union dues or work conditions or what I get for my union or what I have to pay my union, it means a lot it means different things to different players. Younger players, honestly, generally are not that involved. Veteran players who have been through some things and seen some things and changed teams via free agency probably have a little bit more care and say in all these matters. It's kind of like an HOA. If you've ever owned a condo, every now and then you look at your quarterly statement and go, wait a minute, I'm paying how much and what am I getting in return? Wait, we don't have a pool. Why am I paying all this money? Wait, why do we have to get the lawn mowed every week? It's snowing. Like, why am I paying landscaping? And I think at times veteran players will look at this and go, wait a minute, what? But really it comes down to my player rep. And my player rep addresses the team a couple of times a year and we lay it out. Hey guys, here's what I'm hearing. Here's the message from above. And some players go, okay, and raise their hand and ask questions. And the younger players might be staring at their phone. And what that means come the time when you have to vote early in the offseason where people are on vacation for the people that will run the union is anyone's guess. What we do know is that it's the same people for the most part running the union now as it was a couple of months ago. But it also means, as I said, as the NFL is reportedly already renegotiating because of a change in ownership, CBS's broadcast contract well ahead of the 2029 trigger, the league has now some momentum to move the calendar up. And the thought of 2029 is when the NFL world changes. I think we could see that calendar accelerate. And now that these new union bosses are in place, I would get ready for those off-season headlines. And undoubtedly, it will be something discussed next week at the annual meeting. Not the owners' meetings. It's called officially the annual meeting. And Jori and I will both be there.
And one thing to note is I'm trying to remember when exactly we previously got Super Bowl dates for future years. It might be at the owners' meetings next year, but like right now, we already know February 14th, 2027 for the Super Bowl in LA next year. But something that Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated pointed out is that currently the following year in Atlanta, it just says 2028. Like there's not a specific date for that Super Bowl yet. And that could be because there's some questions about, hey, well, we just want to make sure we know when the schedule starting and ending and how many games are going in case there were to be some sort of conversation. And the league has really said until the union had a permanent director rather than an interim executive director, that it would need to wait until to have formal conversations until there's a more formal leader. Now there is as of last week, so these conversations can come. And it is worth noting that Lloyd Howell, who was ousted or resigned, I should say, last August, he was pretty amenable by union standards to 18 games. He did have some comments about, hey, who doesn't love more football, that were not what people were expecting. I think it would be unfair to say that JC Tretter shares all of Lloyd's perspectives, much less that he even necessarily shares everything he felt 9 months ago before all of this happened and led to the resignations. But it'll just be interesting to see, because the union had been heading in a bit of a more pro-business direction rather than a let's fight these labor negotiations direction. And I'm not sure that it worked for them. So do they swing the other direction? Do they try and do it but through a player? There's a lot of questions about this.
A lot of questions. And as you point out, we don't yet know the exact date of the New Orleans Super Bowl. Just think about that. We know when Super Bowl 61 will be. We don't know the exact date on Super Bowl 62. We do, however, know the exact date of the gold medal game in LA for the Olympics in July of 2028. So that date is already on the calendar. But after this past weekend, there are a lot of question marks as to what the U.S. flag football team will look like. If you go back over the last year, the quote-unquote pro flag guys, the Team USA flag guys, had been puffing their chest out, saying, wait a minute, we play flag football. It's a different game. We don't want the NFL players there. Well, sure, we welcome them, but we're better. Like, I'm better than Patrick Mahomes. And people went, come on, dude. Seriously? Well, I mean, I'm not better than Patrick Mahomes, but I am at flag football. Funny thing happened this weekend. So there was this Flag Football Classic. I was there. I was there for the practice on Friday and the games on Saturday. There were 4 games. It was a round robin. 3 of those games included NFL players. Well, 3 against NFL players against pro flag players. And the NFL guys got their asses kicked up and down the field. Like, it was ridiculous. It was 39-14, 43-16, 24-14. The aggregate was 106-42. And it wasn't even that close, people. And these teams had Joe Burrow and Jaden Daniels and Jalen Hurts and Tom Brady, who had 45, or however old he is, still looks good. 46, how old is he now? Whatever. And Saquon Barkley and Odell Beckham and DeAndre Hopkins and Devontae Adams and Jalen Ramsey and a recently retired and amazingly slow Luke Kuechly and Logan Paul, who, like, get out of here. Like, it was just awkward. Had all these guys, and they got their butts kicked. Like, it's a different sport. It's an absolutely different sport. And I think the NFL guys now, after the fact, finally know it. They were humbled. They didn't try to make excuses. They said beforehand on Friday, Sean Payton and Kyle Shanahan were coaching. Jim Harbaugh was there as well. They all said, guys, this is a different sport, but we've really spent time. We've gone over film. Like, we've come up with plays. We know what we're going to be able to do. Like, we can handle this. No, they couldn't. I mean, it was like, you could have played circus music. You could have played like yakety sax in the background. And that's how one-sided it got. And there were a lot of league officials there. The commissioner was there. I spoke to him for a while. Pretty much the entire 345 Park C-suite was there to watch this. And I asked a lot of them, like, what's the narrative now going to be? Is it, well, maybe we shouldn't have NFL players in the game? Is it, well, the league has 2 years, or the NFL players have 2 years to adapt and to figure out how they can be better than the current flag guys? Or is it an admission that the flag teams that we, or the team that we bring to LA 28 in that same stadium where LAFC plays next to the Coliseum needs to be a mix? Because if you send only NFL guys, if the other 5 international teams are even close to the level of the U.S. international team, Jori, that we saw this past Saturday, the NFL guys are going to lose, and they are going to lose badly.
Yeah, I think that's is a really interesting question because there's kind of a three-part question here. There's who's physically best able to play, who's mentally or from a learning standpoint best able to play, and then what's the risk to NFL players' main livelihood if they were to play. So from a physical standpoint, I reached out to someone in the NFL world who's also very involved in flag at a high level, and they said that they weren't surprised that the NFL players were playing like this because they're not necessarily the best players for this specific game from the NFL players. They're like, you need more DBs, more quick twitch guys.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Luke Kuechly is not the best fit for flag football, even if he's excellent. And then from a mental standpoint, part of it is learning the rules, but part of it is also just training into your mind the inability to be physical, was how the person said it to me. And I thought it was so well put, because physicality at all positions is so important to the game of tackle football and NFL football. Even if you're on offense, I mean, think about what the running backs are doing. What Saquon Barkley is doing from a physicality standpoint is so different than what he would be doing from a physicality standpoint in flag football. So there's that element. And then there's the last element, which is, hey, Joe Burrow, the way that you were diving into the end zone and whatnot, like, are the Bengals really going to want to pay you all that money? And then say, hey, right before the season starts, when you have trouble staying healthy during the season, you should go out and play a sport like that for the Olympics. So initially I was like, oh, I guess the NFL players are just not going to be able to play in the way that the league had wanted, and the way that they wanted for the game, and they thought it was going to be a great marketing opportunity. But I still think there's an element of like the Cavante Turpins from the Cowboys, who played in other leagues and kind of succeeded because of his athleticism. Certain DBs, I do think there are NFL players who could play at a high level, but they have to be willing to, they have to have those quick twitch skills, have the desire and time to devote to learning that game at the best level, and then also have teams that are willing to let them go. So even though the NFL has passed proposals that you have to be willing to let X number of players go represent the team, I mean, it's like maybe a U.S. player per team, and there's also if they represent other countries. I think checking all three of those boxes is going to be a much higher hill to climb than we were expecting.
Yeah, it's got to be the quick twitch guys. It's got to be those guys. And Sean Payton talked about it on Friday. He was like, hey, normally, you know, we have Jalen Ramsey here, or Luke Kuechly, who obviously is retired, but the goal for either one of those guys and how they made their money is to run right through the ball carrier, right? You can't do that. It's all about dance moves. It's all about short area quickness. It's all about, like, you can't tackle me in a phone booth, the old, you know, corny broadcaster cliche. That's what these guys are doing. And it's a bunch of backwards laterals. It's Ben, I was talking to one player on Friday, a Pro Bowler, walking off the field after practice. And he was like, dude, this is not football. And he didn't say that like in a derogatory way. It was just like, this just is a different sport. It's not even 7-on-7. And Brady lamented that after the game. Like, I thought it'd be a little more like 7-on-7. It isn't. It's almost like lacrosse. Like, you have two quarterbacks back there, and one of them is looking and looking and looking, and then defender gets close, and before you let him pull the flag, you lateral it to your other quarterback. Like hockey or lacrosse, like you're outside the zone, you're looking for a lane to score. Here comes the defense. You pass it back. That's not football. We call it football, but it's entirely different.
Yeah, I think what was so fascinating, right? We hit on this a little bit last week, is the assumption was, do we want the NFL players to play? That was because they're better, right, than the flag players. It was like, okay, do we want them to play? It's during training camp. There's the injury risk. But we alluded to that a little bit, like it's a different game. The NBA players playing in the Olympics, there are different rules, right? You can hit the ball off of the rim. The three-point line's different. The ball's different. Physicality's different. Now, it's a lot closer. You could also say like 3-on-3 basketball is different than full court basketball. They're slightly different games. And I think in general, as you would expect, like the NFL has some of the most elite athletes. They're going to come in here. They kind of know the rules, but whatever. We're NFL players. We're going to dominate. And it seemed, you know, you were there, Andrew, so I defer to you. I would guess they were probably going through the motions a little bit, all of a sudden we're getting beat, we're starting to try,
Right.
and then continuing to get beat, and we're going, whoa, wait a second, now we're getting a little upset, we're getting a little embarrassed here, what's going on? So I think it'll be fascinating to see over the course of this time. This is almost, for NFL owners, maybe the best thing that could have happened is you have this like, hey, we gave you guys your shot, is the off season, look what happened, and
Absolutely
agree. Our
So
hands
true.
are clean. Like, I don't know when this was scheduled relative to everything else, but this was like the perfect showcase. Also, it was in LA, right, instead of in the Middle East for obvious reasons. So I think more people potentially saw it as well. Like, it kind of was the perfect showcase to maybe be why the NFL players aren't the best for this flag football competition.
Yeah, a couple
Andrew,
of things. Go ahead.
do you know, because you went to it in LA and you live there, I know they moved it in part because of the war, and that obviously makes a lot of sense. It was supposed to be in Saudi Arabia. Did some players agree after that to sign on? Like, do you know which NFL players were signed up beforehand and which specifically said, okay, now that I can just fly domestically, I'm in?
It's a great question, and I don't know the exact number, but I think it is fair to assume that there was some roster juggling because of it. And first of all, let's go tip of the cap to the organizers, whether it's Fanatics or BBO or Fawkes or anybody that got this thing done. Because if we go back a few weeks, it's the Friday of the Combine, just a little perspective here, and that is when the war started in the Middle East. And literally that Friday, I was talking to some of the people over the weekend. That Friday, they had to make the decision right then and there. All right, we're out. We can't do this. So we have to find a venue. Miami was discussed, but LA was eventually picked. It's a great venue. It's only about 8 to 10 years old. It's where LAFC plays, right next to the Coliseum. They were able to get a great turnout from these NFL players because it was in Los Angeles. Half the NFL trains in Southern California to begin with. There was another flag event at the RX3 Aaron Rodgers charity thing in Orange County on Saturday. So like half the league was here. There were a bunch of parties that were thrown. It was a destination event, and they pulled it off. There's been some snark about a bad crowd. I mean, they didn't really start advertising this thing until about 10 days ago. No one knew it was here until about 10 days ago. I thought they had a pretty decent turnout on what was a very unseasonably hot day. Standing on the field Friday for the practice the day before, it was legitimately 100 degrees at 1 p.m. local here for practice. 100 degrees. I was joking with Joe Burrow after that practice. It's hotter. It was hotter Friday in LA than it was in Riyadh, where the game had been scheduled to be played, by a legit 12 to 14 degrees.
That's crazy.
Hotter there in LA. So they threw this thing together, and for that, they should be commended, truly. Sean Payton and Kyle Shanahan can say they were prepared, and I have no doubt that they did take this thing seriously. But once the game started, you immediately saw that it wasn't going to be close. The first game was a blowout, and the first game was a Burrow-led game. Brady comes out for the second game, and Brady marches his team down the field on the opening drive. And it's precision Tom Brady. And Gronk catches a touchdown, also pulls a hammy, and was never seen from again on that opening drive. And we all look at each other and go, okay, now they're not messing around. There is I'm not letting Tom Brady down level of focus and intensity right now. And then the other team went on like a 30-0 run. It didn't matter that Tom Brady scored on the opening drive. That was it. Like, it was over at that point. So these guys were humbled. I did hear at least one story of, just one, there might have been others, of a player that might have been there where there was some pushback from ownership going, we'd rather not. And that player chose to not, fight that battle for an exhibition in March. And even though the league says teams have to allow players, the Twitter reaction from Bengal and Commander fans when Burrow and Jaden Daniels are getting twisted around and trying to avoid getting their flag pulled, that online reaction, I know we're going to see those videos in the summer of 2028 when guys come out and say, yes, I want to play.
I think that the owners are going to see those videos in the meetings next week.
Yes.
And maybe the privilege session next week, and maybe reconsider some of their proposals or just how they go about executing those proposals.
I don't think the rule is like they voted 32-0 last year. And I'm sure there
someone could play. So they still have a little bit of...
players could play. Correct. Behind the scenes, our owners got to tell their big name players, hey, listen, I don't want you doing this. I will happily send my kick returner because he might actually be better suited for this game.
Right.
But
ultimately,
I'm not sending my $40 million wide receiver.
Ultimately, we're the USA. We want to win. We kind of saw this with basketball, right? Where not all the top players went. We started losing, and look, all of a sudden the top players went, but they were also best case to win. I'm curious if you have a lot of flag players too, if you need a couple NFL players for marketing, right? And just like promoting it. Yeah. Justin Jefferson or whomever, plus a lot of flag players, is a lot different sell than a lot of flag players that a lot of people haven't heard of.
And RG3 came on the Fawkes broadcast. Kevin Burkhardt, Greg Olson calling the game without ties, thankfully. He said he's in. He wants to play. Who else? What was the other name I heard over the weekend? I think they can and will find a great mix. The one thing I did confirm, there is this concern that it's going to overlap with training camp. Not really. Opening ceremony is the 14th of July. In 2028 in LA. It's on a Friday, as always. And there are only going to be 6 teams in the tournament. It's not going to be like a 30-team round robin. There are going to be 6 teams going for that gold. The tournament is going to be jammed into the first week of the games. So if you do play, you are going to be ready to report to day one of training camp. There's not going to be any overlap. That's already been figured out between the IOC, the U.S. Olympic Committee, and the NFL. So no second week of the games where, hey, I can't be there at training camp because of this.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because, again, they approved that players could play, but it's still a limit of 1 player per NFL team on each national team participating. So at most, the complicated is, okay, if you're Nigerian and American or you grew up in Nigeria, you could be a different person from your Vikings team, let's say, than someone representing the U.S. on your Vikings team. But it's not going to be a huge number from each team, and then they still have to negotiate with the PA. Hey, what are the injury guarantees going to look like? Hey, what are the medical standards going to look like? Because I agree, you could physically be in attendance for training camp. The question is if you pull a hamstring or this or that. So it could be that whatever insurance they get is much more relevant if you're making $3 million a year, the percentage that it will cover, than if you're making $40 million a year. Like, some of that would not surprise me in terms of the details of how they make it. So Kvonde Turpin might play, but Joe Burrow's probably not playing.
Yeah, and we saw in the Olympics for hockey a season-ending injury to a key player for the LA Kings. We've seen nagging injuries from the WBC already affecting not only spring training, but roster cut-down decisions in Major League Baseball with opening day looming later this week.
And those are all, I just want to know, those are all players playing the same sport with the same rules generally. Exactly. There's also a degree of, the less you understand the game and the rules that it's being played by, the more likely you are to get hurt because you might not know how to protect yourself and have the muscle memory of protecting yourself. Okay.
There were a couple of the segments already going long, but for lack of a better description, the players lined up immediately on either side of the center, the guards, if you would call them that in the NFL. There were plays in which the ball was snapped to the quarterback, and then he immediately just like flicked it to the guy standing to his right, 3 feet, the guard who would run for 10, 15 yards. Those were plays, and they used them a lot. The pro flag guys did Team USA in the red zone, where the NFL, as much as they say that we'd prepared for this, they had never seen that before, and they were caught with their pants down. So I have no doubt that more preparation, the NFL players will be better, but clearly they were overmatched. It's kind of funny. It was a great event, and truly, tip of the cap to everyone who pulled that off, because they moved an event to another continent with 3 weeks' notice and got it done. All right, coming up here on Inside Coverage, should you be allowed to trade draft picks 5 years in advance? Plus, Jori with the latest on A.J. Brown. It's Inside Coverage on Yahoo. It's Inside Coverage Rolling on here on Yahoo. Andrew Siciliano, Jori, Epstein, and Ben Fawkes. The JSN deal is a big deal. If you're waiting for other wide receiver news involving A.J. Brown, it likely is not going to happen until your kids are out of school for the summer. There is a big date lingering and looming midsummer, before which, Jori, tell us what you know, an A.J. Brown deal would likely be impossible?
Yeah, it's really interesting because initially I was thinking A.J. Brown would get traded during the first week of free agency. This is one of the best receivers available or semi-available. If you're a team who wants him, and the Patriots seemed like a perfect match for so many reasons, then wouldn't you want to be able to plan accordingly? You want to get him before someone else did. A week of free agency goes by, and A.J. Brown's not traded. So I started asking around, and I'm like, well, maybe A.J. Brown is going to get traded during the NFL draft. After all, the Philadelphia Eagles acquired A.J. Brown via a trade during the NFL draft when they traded during the first round from the Tennessee Titans. And I thought that made a lot of sense. Hey, a team who wants a receiver doesn't get the guy they want. All of a sudden, they call up Howie. They're more desperate. Howie gets the picks he wants, which seem to be something like a first and a second. It makes total sense. But then the more I talked to people around the league, the more I actually learned it's really unlikely. I shouldn't say it's unlikely. The Eagles have to be willing to take a serious consequence in order to trade A.J. Brown before June 2nd. Because if they trade A.J. Brown before June 2nd, they will have to absorb the entire $43.45 million in dead cap space on their 2026 salary cap. They trade him afterwards, they could split it over a couple of years. There's not zero chance that the Eagles do this, especially after their extension or renegotiation with Dallas Goedert. But that is a lot of money for them to have to be willing to take on. And I think it's interesting because we hear so much about, he's being released, but it's going to be designated a post-June 1st release. Or, this is happening, but we're designating this. We're putting these void years. And there are so many different... Someone balked at me using the word loopholes when I was talking to them for this story, but there's so many different mechanisms and rules through which the salary cap for a certain year does not have to be fixed and it can be manipulated. And even with a release, you can call it a June 1st release, and you have to keep that money on your books for a bit, but you can start making moves around it. But you can't designate a trade as post June 1st, and you can't involve a trade where you want something with 2026 picks unless you're willing to take all the $43.45 million on this year's cap. So I just think it's kind of this number that once they didn't get it done at first, it's possible they still trade. It's possible that they maneuver some of their other contracts with a willingness to keep this much, but it's a lot of dead cap space for a guy who's not going to be on your team when, by the way, you're still going to need someone to replace him because he's one of the best players on your team.
And I always go back to the same thing. Like every time we bring up the Eagles, I just can't imagine a more unhappy, successful team, right? Like they've gone 50-18 the last 4 years. They've won the NFC East 3 times, and they're consistently unhappy. And to me, this just seems like an addition by subtraction, right? That the team could be better, the locker room better, even if you are less talented overall on the football field, just because some part of this is not working with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, the offensive line regressing a bit, the quarterback regress. It just isn't the same. Something isn't the way that it should be. And even when they're winning, it just doesn't seem like a happy team. So it seems like this is something that should get done. It's interesting that Jori's reporting kind of looking into when potentially it will. And I think it'll be interesting to look at the draft and kind of see how it goes. And with that first round, right, are there some teams that we assume need a wide receiver and they don't draft a wide receiver in the first round or the first 2 rounds? And you say, wait a second, maybe they have a trade kind of in principle agreed to as much as you can that they know is coming down the line. And so, okay, that's why this team at 30 didn't draft a wide receiver, 31 or even earlier. So I think we'll get some information in the draft. If not, like we said, maybe a trade during the draft where someone drops and someone's like, hey, we're going to jump on this and go in there. But it is interesting because it started like, okay, this could be even free agency. And then it was like, all right, it'll probably be the draft. And now it makes a lot of sense. It would kind of be post June 1.
So you could see, and I want you to wrap your head around this, you could see between 10 to a dozen wide receivers taken in the first 2 rounds. It could go that high. there's a solid chance it is double digits. And while a lot of people will tell you that there's no Jamar Chase in this draft, okay, but there's a lot of depth. There is a lot of wide receiver depth in this draft, and a lot of it's going to go in the first 3 rounds, if not the first 2 rounds. Also, I think we kind of have a framework for what the Eagles can expect in return if they were to trade A.J. Brown. If you look at the Jalen Waddle deal, it's in essence a 1 and a 3. There's a 4th-round pick swap in there, which the Dolphins felt they needed to even things out and even the math in their mind. But also remember that Jalen Waddle is about 2 years younger than A.J. Brown, and the guarantees on his contract over the next 2 years are significantly cheaper than A.J. Brown. So the Broncos paid a 1 and a 3 and a 4th-round pick swap for a younger, cheaper player. So just keep that in mind. I'm not saying that if the Eagles trade him, they can't get the same return, but the idea that they're going to get a better return than that, even if you think AJ is a better player than Jalen, to me, I think is a bit unreasonable. I wouldn't get my hopes up.
It's a great point, Andrew, and I think there's 2 elements here. First of all, as Ben alluded to earlier in the show, a 30th overall pick and a 4th overall pick are both 1st-round picks, but they're not the same. And so that's why the Broncos trade reminded me of what I was thinking the Patriots and Eagles would be interested in doing, which is that you can say you got a 1st-round pick and you do have the 5th-year option, but the final 3 picks of the 1st round this year in a draft that is not considered particularly high on top-end talent and top-end talent at premium positions feels from a talent perspective like a 2nd round, and then everyone kind of wins. Given that AJ is 29, given that he has had injuries, including a knee issue that is degenerative, and it hasn't necessarily like drastically impacted his production in recent years, but I've talked to some teams who feel like he's still got it in him for sure, and others who are questioning whether he has more than 1 year in his prime left because of that knee, kind of not unlike what we were seeing with Max Crosby and the questions between the Ravens and the Raiders. And so when I talk to people, that late 1st and the 3rd is a general framework, but a lot of people think a conditional pick is going to be included. So not just another swap pick like what the Broncos did with the Dolphins, but hey, if AJ does X in 2027, this pick goes up or this pick goes down. And so whether it's a 1st and a 2nd or a 1st and a 3rd, that can go to a 2nd or 2 seconds, but the 2nd goes to a 1st if he has over 1,000 yards, plays 75% of offensive snaps, whatever the thresholds are. I think that another team is likely to be more comfortable paying the capital that Howie wants if it feels like it has protections in there to ensure that if AJ drops off a cliff, which I hope he doesn't, and I don't think he will yet, that there is some degree of protection there.
Yeah,
and that
absolutely.
would probably be a 2027 conditional because it would be based off what he does this year.
As of now, whomever trades for AJ Brown, if they do, he could be an Eagle. And judging at my comments on social media when I did a post on this last week, Eagles fans, you're convinced he is going to be an Eagle. Okay, that's fine. You can only, if you're one of the other 31 teams, trade the Eagles picks 3 years in advance. That is the NFL rule as it stands right now. You could only trade picks from 3 drafts into the future. The Browns last week, late Wednesday evening after we put last week's final episode to bed, proposed a rule, and it will be taken into consideration at the annual meeting next week, that you can trade picks 5 years in advance. And the initial reaction was, well, because the Browns have their name on it, filled with snark, not surprisingly. How many more picks do they want to trade away? How many picks do they think it's going to take to get up and get Arch Manning at the top of the 2027 draft? Things like that. I get it. But may I offer a more reasonable view of this? The NBA allows teams to trade picks 7 years in advance. And when we say trade picks, we don't just mean number 1 picks. We mean any pick, like a conditional pick, like Jori is mentioning, 3 years down the line. 7 years in advance in the NBA. Now, there are some caveats there. You can't trade picks, 1st-round picks, in consecutive years, right? The NBA has all these little stopgaps in there. The NHL, I believe, has no limitations on the number of picks you could trade in advance. And in baseball, you cannot trade future draft picks. So there are like draft slots and international slots and things like that. That's a bit different. So if the NBA is 7 and the NFL is 3, I'll be honest with you guys, I don't have a problem moving it to 5. I really don't. Now, I don't know that this is going to pass. Matter of fact, my gut tells me it isn't going to pass, at least not this year. But I think this is something that may gain some momentum. There are already teams out there. The Rams, Kevin Demoff, their COO, posted pretty quickly after this news broke that, hey, they're all in favor of it. So it's not as crazy, Jori, as it seems. I think 5 isn't unreasonable.
Yeah, I think it's notable that Kevin Demoff of the Rams is the one who said that, because Kevin Demoff also oversees for owner Stan Kroenke the Denver Nuggets. He oversees their hockey teams. He oversees several sports leagues. So to him, some of the things that other sports leagues are doing already are not going to be crazy. I like the idea because, like you said, one, it's already being done in other sports leagues. And I think, to me, there's always this idea of who benefits from this. Well, if you're a team who wants to make a trade, you now have more options to trade. You have more assets, as one person put it toward me. And if you are the league, and really owners too, and one of your top goals is to make money, which you make money by entertaining people, which requires interest, people love trades. All our winners and losers from every single trade, from the trade deadline, from this. And so I think, to me, it really reminds me of the tush-push conversation, which is the way in which this rule is presented to the owners and the reasons that it is presented could make or break whether it passes. Had the tush-push been presented for, hey, this isn't a football player, as opposed to, hey, this is a health and safety risk, even though we don't have data on that yet, we just are projecting data, I think it would have passed. It came pretty close. It was 22 votes rather than 24. If you tell the owners, people love trades, they're entertaining, now we'll have more people dealing, more wheeling and dealing, more ability to change your fortunes, more ability to commit to a rebuild, I think owners would be on board for that. But if you say, oh, well, analytics, this, and strategy, that, fair or not, I think that's going to scare some people away. Yep. And so to me, this is all about the presentation in terms of whether it will convince people.
Yeah, I'm all for it too. More excitement, more content, which is good for us. And ultimately, it would be really interesting to know, let's just say it passes, you can trade up to 5 first-round picks. Peyton Manning is coming out next year. What am I trading for him, right? To get up. I'm hypothetically. Yes, I'm not saying Arch, right? I'm saying if he was, right, or a can't miss absolute prospect, what are you, bad example with Arch, what are you willing to trade for that,
Manning,
right?
hypothetically, coming out next year.
Second rounder for Eli.
Actually,
no.
Did you guys see Marshall, Peyton's son, the viral video over the weekend of him working out? He's in high school. So, yeah, like you want to trade 5 first-round picks to try to line up Marshall Manning in 8 years, go for it, or 7 years.
And also, you just have different front offices that, like we saw with the Rams, that value picks differently. And so I think it would be really interesting to see who wants to trade away those future picks, who wants to keep them. I think it would just open up a lot more things.
I'm all for it. And I understand the snark. Oh, the Browns did this. They traded for Deshaun. Guys, forget who proposes it. I mean, the Packers officially were the ones that brought the tush-push that George just mentioned thing to the table. Last year wasn't their idea. They just were the ones that brought it to the table. That's a whole nother backstory. But it's just...
Sure is.
Yep, it sure is. But there's a conversation to be had. I think it's worth having. I truly, truly do. And I think there's a reasonable middle ground there between what the NFL currently has at 3 and the NBA has at 7. All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, time for one more thing before we go. Can I point out that I used to do this on NFL Now like a decade ago, and now NFL Live does it as well? I'm not saying they stole it, but just they also do it at the end of the show. Whatever. All right. Whatever. Jori, you go.
All right. My one more thing is on the more serious note, which is that former NFL receiver A.J. Green wrote a really powerful piece for the Players Tribune about his relationship with the late wide receiver Rondale Moore, who died by apparent suicide in February. And he was talking about his relationship with Rondale and a lot about who he was as a person, but he also talked about what he wanted to see from the NFL on the mental health front. And he had a really powerful line where he said, as much as the NFL can say we're mental health this, mental health that, we're raising awareness, he wrote, and I quote, "None of that means anything if the people who are making the football decisions in private are viewing mental health issues how I feel like a lot of times they still get viewed, as a red flag. That's the truth. That's how it's viewed in this league by a lot of people." And then he goes on to say, as long as you tell people it's a red flag and it could affect their money, players are going to keep lying about it. And I thought that that was such an important point. And Albert Breer has a great story out about a player who's diagnosed with bipolar disorder, Ernest Hausman, out of Michigan as well. But I think having this conversation about how players with diagnosed mental health challenges, even coming into the league, are viewed and what infrastructure is set up is so important, rather than just waiting until something happens, another Rondale Moore-like situation happens.
Absolutely. AJ Green was not the loudest when he was a player. As a matter of fact, whether it was with the Bengals or with the Cardinals, he was a very, very quiet, short-answered guy in interviews. This, however, is something that is powerful. And you need to read, and tip of the cap to AJ Green for putting these thoughts down on paper. A serious, one more thing, but a serious topic there. Thank you, Jori. Ben, what do you got?
Yeah, mine, not as serious, just focusing on NFL draft and kind of, I think Jeremiah Love is just fascinating. You know, we have Fernando Mendoza. We're expecting him to go number 1 to the Raiders. But on kind of most boards, and I think it's been creeping up slowly, is Jeremiah Love, right? Whether he's the number 1 player on people's big board, the number 2, certainly in the top 5. And it's interesting just because you have a running back, right, which we've seen that position devalued. Do you want to take a top 5, top 10 pick on a running back? He's such a talented player, but obviously we saw the Giants taking Saquon and what it means. And can you get somebody in the 2nd or 3rd round who is 80% as good, 70% as good for so much less money? But is Jeremiah Love just that good that he's worth that pick, whether that theoretically is as high as the Cardinals at 3, Titans at 4, the Giants at 5, Commanders at 7, like even theoretically the Chiefs at 9, right? They already got Kenneth Walker. You could certainly have 2 in the backfield there. There's so many teams where he would make sense. I just think it's interesting from a positional value perspective versus just kind of a once in a generation talent, that kind of Adrian Peterson. You know, we saw Jahmyr Gibbs go in the teens. Everyone thought that was really, really high. He's completely transformed that offense as well. So I'll be very curious to see kind of where he goes. And right now he's minus 650 to be a top 5 pick. So the betting markets have him in the top 5. And it seems like that's where the big boards and some mock drafts have him as well.
For my money, and I'm not talking betting, but for my money, Jeremiah Love is the key to this draft. Because let's just assume it's Mendoza at 1, it's defense to the Jets at 2, it's likely defense or O-line to the Cardinals at 3. The Titans, let's go edge, although you could potentially go Love or Tate there and give Cam Ward a weapon at 4. What do the Giants do at 5? I don't think they're going running back. Could they go Cardinal Tate? You never know. But if he gets through 4 and 5, potentially. I don't think right now, a month out, that the Browns would go running back. They like Quinshon and Dylan Sampson. They took 2 last year. They're not going to go running back right now at 6. Is he the one player for which teams are willing to trade up in this top 10? Because there aren't many in this draft where you go, I'm going to give up assets, whether it's a day 3 pick or a day 2 pick this year. Certainly no one wants to give up 2027 assets. Who is the one player? The Chiefs and the Saints both went out and spent significant free agent money at running back. Are they now out of the running? Does Washington, sitting there at 7 right behind Cleveland, truly believe that those other 2 teams no longer want Jeremiah Love? Do they get antsy? Do they want him? Will they move up? Will somebody jump Washington at 7? Again, a month out, for my money, Love is the key to the top 10. Now, could the Cardinals take him at 3 and mess everything up? Sure. Could someone call Arizona and say, we want to take all the questions out of this and just jump up to 3 and get ahead of everyone? I think that's always a possibility as well. My one more thing back to the flag football game. Did you see Odell Beckham Jr. with that ridiculous climb the ladder catch in the back of the end zone in the first flag game on Saturday? It was sick. By the way, it was also a smaller ball, not to ruin it. It was still a great catch. OBJ said after the game that, yes, he still would like to play football. Someone threw the idea out there. What about the Giants and helping out Jackson Dart? He said, of course, I would love to do that. I would be very surprised if Odell Beckham Jr. came back and played football. He did not play last year. He played only 9 games the year before with the Dolphins, and it didn't seem like it didn't go poorly, but I think kind of everyone walked away from that year in 2024 and went, okay, time to retire and go off and do better things. It would be fun to see him make a comeback. Just color me surprised if that actually happens. I would, however, love to see him on the flag team in LA in 28 because he certainly proved that he'd be a drawing card and B, I think, a valuable member of that team if you want to put a combination of NFL and flag guys out there. We have blown through every stop sign on this show and made it far longer than ever intended. But a friendly reminder, there is no offseason. So, friends, that was fun. Want to do it again on Wednesday?
Let's do it.
Well, neither you here are on Wednesday. I mean, but you
Somebody
guys can
will.
certainly. Yeah. It'll be C. Rob and Frank on Wednesday. But if you guys want to join us, please, you know the Zoom link. For Jori Epstein, for Ben Fawkes, my name is Andrew Siciliano. Thanks for listening to, thanks for watching Inside Coverage on Yahoo. So long.